On this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, we chat about why background checks and security cameras might be a complete and total waste of time. Welcome to Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty Leadership Interview Series. I'm your host, Dov Barron, founder of Full Monty Leadership. If you're a new listener or new viewer, I want to thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in, we're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, a big thank you to you for being one of the over 1.5 million downloads and making us the number one podcast for Fortune 500 listeners and consistently keeping us at the top in human resources, next-gen leadership, and a whole other bunch of terrific categories to do with leadership. So thank you for sharing the show with everyone you know. Remember, as always, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please get over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Were you a fan of the show Criminal Minds? I certainly was. I loved that show. And how they would profile these attackers, these criminals, and how they would actually be able to sort those out. Well, let's do this. Let's imagine you are walking down the street one night, late at night. Let's say 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. You're walking down that street. It's pretty quiet. You can hear your own footsteps. There doesn't seem to be any cars on the road. You've turned off the main drag and you're walking along, and suddenly you see somebody approaching you on that street, on the same side of the street as you. How do you know if that someone approaching you is friendly or a threat? Is it in the way that they look, or is it something else altogether? One of the highest skill sets is the ability to use certain rare psychological understanding to be able to profile a potential threat. So here's my question to you. Do you need a system of defense that is by design? My guest today is a noted TED speaker, an authority on the subject of profiling and threat assessment, having trained over 350,000 in live audiences during his 29 years in the field. He regularly conducts continuing education seminars in educational, medical, legal, financial, real estate, human resources, risk management, and with insurance professionals, both in the public and the private sector. But Jeff, our guest today, best sums up his work in his message saying, "My goal is to help you spot trouble before it spots you." So please, put your hands together and welcome our guest today. You know what? I am not even going to say your last name because I keep getting it wrong. So welcome, Jeff. Put your hands together. Woo! The crowd goes wild. Pronounce your last name so everybody gets it right.
McKissack.
McKissack. See?
I tell folks, if you say it fast, I'll never know the difference.
All right, that's it. Jeff McKissack. Okay? It's kind of like, no, I won't go there because that's nosy.
Oh, don't go there.
Anyway. Welcome, Jeff. Good to have you here, mate.
Oh, great to be here. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really good to have you here. So, Jeff, we've all gotten a little paranoid, I think, and some would say it's appropriate. I think most of us would tend to Google someone before we meet them. But even if we did that, why is it that background checks and security cameras might often just be a waste of time? What is missing? What are we not getting?
Well, the problem is with background checks. I'll give you one example just from one area. Say, let's take child molestation. Several years ago, Duke University did a study of child molesters in the state prison system there in Georgia and found out that the average child molester actually victimized 65 kids before they were caught for the first time. So if we just take that same paradigm and apply it over to other areas, whether it's embezzlement, white-collar crime, whatever, just because someone passes a background check doesn't mean they're innocent. It may mean they're smart enough to not yet get caught. So when we look at a background check and think, oh, well, they passed the background check, that doesn't necessarily mean they're innocent. The other thing I constantly deal with corporate executives, C-level suite, HR, and others, how often do you do a background check? We had a situation here a couple of years ago in Dallas where the Dallas Independent School District announced that it was going to go through and actually renew the background checks of all of its employees, and the teachers union was up in arms.
Sure.
Why? Because a lot has happened since the first day they were hired and had a background check done. So if employees have no accountability where when you hire someone, say, now, not only are we doing a background check now, but just so you're aware, we're going to be repeating this background check every year, every 2 years, every 3 years. You almost build in some accountability. You cannot tell me that's not going to factor into the way certain employees behave off the clock and off premise. If they know the accountability is going to be there every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, versus just when they got hired.
Well, we live in a time of everybody is a walking detective. We've all got one of these.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And everybody can video you. And Gary Vaynerchuk, who some of you I know are very familiar with, but Gary said something I thought was profound. He said that the days of really having that anonymity are gone.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that he said that I thought was kind of interesting, I'm not sure I entirely agree with it, but I get it. And what he said was, if you acted as if you knew there was always a camera on you, maybe you'd be a better person. Maybe you would hold yourself a little more accountable. I don't want cameras on me all the time. I'm a public person, and I don't like the idea of everybody being able to view me and take things out of context, because it's not what we capture, it's the context that is also the point. So this is a thing for me in this kind of work that you're talking about, is how do you, because you know as well as I do, a background check or even a video can show something that has no context. I'll give you an example. I read recently about a gentleman who was on the sex offenders list, right? Terrible thing. I mean, God, I can't imagine what that would be like. And guess what he was on the sex offenders list for? He hadn't molested anybody. He hadn't raped anybody. He hadn't done any of that. He was
urination in public.
Exactly.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, he had urinated in public.
Yep.
And became on the sex offenders list. Like, wow.
Yeah.
So this is where it goes the other side. Help us to grasp this, Jeff. Help us to understand this, because, again, this is an example of a background check is actually not revealing, because it's, sex offender. Well, he took a pee in public, and I defy any man, even the most auspicious of us all, who hasn't had an emergency moment, and being a guy, we can sort of find a back alley and do something.
Right.
So how do we sort this out? How do we sort out context as well as content? Because in a background check, it's content very often.
A lot of it means that we have to actually dig in and do some research. I think background checks are important, but also think checking references is another key thing, including, obviously, if they have former employers, getting their feedback. Of course, sometimes people can push their problem in your direction. In other words, they had an issue, they're just trying to get rid of it, and they go, oh, you'll take our hot potato? We'll send it your way with a great recommendation.
Right.
So it's a balance of all these things. The other thing, I was just with an HR group this morning, social media is also a great way to get a more inclusive snapshot of the person's personality. Remember, you're not just hiring an employee or a person, you're hiring their personality.
Absolutely.
And so to actually look at their Twitter feed, to look at their Facebook, actually to Google their name. Now, if their name is John Smith, good luck. But if they have a name that actually stands out, or you can go to LinkedIn, but it means we have to dig in. But if you're looking for a quality employee, isn't it worth that extra effort to really, truly get a comprehensive profile of the person you're wanting to hire?
When we talk about threats here, which let's talk about the kinds of threats that you take care of.
Well, a lot of
Well,
it,
how people predict.
It's going to be more the physical, as far as not just what happens where we always think of active shooter, but that's our few and far between case. What we see more of, and according to the American Society of Industrial Security a few years ago, actually one of the number one, if not now the number one cause of workplace violence is when domestic violence manifests in the workplace. In other words, when someone's ex or current spouse or boyfriend or paramour shows up at work, not with a gun, but maybe with fisticuffs ensuing, and where you have a physical altercation because of something that was at home that followed, predominantly women, of course, into the workplace. That's a huge, huge concern now as far as workplace violence. But then you have other things where people using social engineering ploys can pretend to be someone they're not, and they can enter a building. They can use it for property theft. They can use it for vandalism. They can use it for other harm. And right now, it's a big, big feature as far as using it for data mining, as far as data breaches.
Right.
In other words, to give you a classic example, and three particular verticals are facing this right now. People that have mortgage companies, title companies, and real estate companies. One of the major ploys right now for data mining and identity theft is someone pretending to be a copy repairman. If you think about copy repairmen are some of the most invisible service people that ever come in.
Sure.
And now take a busy office like a mortgage, title company, or realtor where people are coming and going at all times and people are coming in out door and out the door. They just walk in and say, hey, I hear a copier's broke down. They just point them in the general direction and leave. Now they go back to the copier. They really are there to work on the copier, but not the way you thought. So they go back to the copier, which, by the way, aren't just copiers anymore, are they?
No, they're all linked up.
They're computers, and they have memory cards.
Right.
So they go in and they just swap out the memory cards of the copier. Think of what goes on the copier, a mortgage company, a title company, and a realtor. Your entire financial history.
Yeah.
And they have all the former place you've lived. They know all your finances, and you wonder how your identity got stolen. And that's just one example of using social engineering now for data mining and data theft and data breaches. But there are many others. And so you take that idea, not only of social engineering, but I'm speaking at a conference for credit union CEOs next week, where you take that same concept of social engineering, now apply it to where I'm not trying to come in your company. I'm going to compromise one of your employees. I'm going to get them caught in either a bribery situation or a blackmail situation where I never come on premise because I've got one of your own people doing my bidding from the inside.
So let's go to that. So now breaking it up here, because we started out talking about physical threat, and we can certainly return to that in a minute. But now we're talking about more of identity theft, potential espionage, corporate espionage, those kinds of things. So, yeah, the person can disguise themselves, can, as you said, they can manipulate the situation to say that they are like the copy guy. But at the same time, they can also do things like, as you said, find somebody inside of the company. They could do exactly what it is you're suggesting. Do some kind of data mining on that person, some background checking on that person, and find out that Fred had this issue that's been buried in Google, but they know how to go in and find that. They get that up and they go to Fred and they go, hey, Fred, we want this, or else the whole company's going to know that you did that. Yep. And they're not going to understand context. They're going to know. They don't care that you took a pee in public. They're just going to see that you're on the sex offenders list.
Or they take Fred and find out Fred has a very much of a gambling addiction and a gambling problem. Right. Or they find Fred has a special needs family member and the medical bills are piling up. Oh, yeah, there's all these different points of vulnerability. And these are predators. You've got to understand, these are predators. They know how to select their prey, and they know how to cultivate that prey.
See, that's the thing right there. That's the thing I want people to grasp. I think this is the importance of this message that you're sharing, Jeff, and I think why it's important is I think we've got to really sort out the people who are what I call accidental criminals. And what I mean by that is there is a situation that comes up that is so outside of the norm for them. There's a person who, they're going to lose their child if they don't come up with all this money, and they do something that is stupid and but they're trying to save a life, or there's some massive emergency, and that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about these people who are predators. I mean, they get up every morning and it's their job to screw people over and steal or damage in some way, whether that's identity or physicality. And I think that that's an important piece for you to get across here, is that you're actually helping people understand this piece around predatorial behavior. Help us understand that.
Yeah, because not everyone that will participate in, let's say, a data breach in this case, not everyone that participates in a data breach type situation who's an employee on the inside is doing it willingly.
No.
In other words, whether it's because they are now facing astronomical bills and personal bankruptcy and they need financial help, and this person who befriended them, They befriended them at the club or the pub. They befriended them at the country club. They befriended them at church, wherever the case is. They know where their stalking ground is.
Yeah.
They befriended them. They came in initially as their savior and their hero to bail them out. Nothing was at the time mentioned as far as strings being attached. But once the hooks are in, and now there is that indebtedness there, that's where it comes to them and say, well, I know you don't want to do this, but you're going to do this. I helped you. I own now the title to your home. I purchased it to bail you out, but I now own your home. Do you want to continue living there or not? Do you want to continue to have your child in that special school that caters to special needs kids or not? And the problem so often, I had one lady that asked me this in the HR program I just did this morning. She said, but how do we get ahead of something like that? I said, now that is the question more companies should be asking.
Right.
Because you can come in, and much the way the schools have done this for decades, it's not the school's responsibility to teach stranger danger, drug abuse, sex education. That's the job of parents. And yet schools have done it. Why? Do they have responsibility? No. But they realize an empty desk does no one any good.
Mm-hmm.
Until companies perceive the same with their employees, that an empty desk does no one any good, and start taking on teaching and offering courses in stress management, offering classes in budgeting, offering programs in marriage counseling or parenting or things that just keep the distractions from off the clock following to the employees on the clock, and get ahead of these stories by being proactive in what they're offering their employees to address on and off the clock concerns. It's always going to be an available ploy for someone else out there to exploit. But you can't just look at it. And in fact, you were talking about a situation where people are just situational criminals. And I actually do a lot of times make that same differentiation. I had one of our major newspapers here in Dallas several years ago bring me in to do a full day of training their employees. The head of security brought me in and said, Jeff, I won't be here this afternoon. You're doing sessions. I got to meet the FBI. Unfortunately, one of our 20-plus year employees we're putting in handcuffs this afternoon. We found out in the last 3 to 5 years he's embezzled $250,000.
Wow.
What happened is he got in some dire financial straits, and he was in a place where he could access the money in the files from the paper and just start absconding funds. I don't think he really initially got into this where he wanted to do it.
No.
He wasn't for profit, per se. He was doing it to take care of an immediate situation. And how sad it was that he couldn't go to his employer and say, I'm in a bad situation. Is there anything I can do to potentially help me out financially in this situation? Is there more hours I can work? Is there something else I can do to earn some extra money to address this?
But this is, we're probably on a different subject than where you would normally go, and I like that because we're digging underneath a little bit. But, when you look at the psychology of the U.S. as a economic psychology, things changed in 2008, and when they changed, officially on the surface it kind of looks pretty much like things have gone back to normal, but the pressure and the stress of people to have a lifestyle that we call the American lifestyle is really how to live at about 30 cents above what you earn. Right? So that's what it is. If you look at the numbers, about 30 cents above what you earn. So every time you bring home $100, you're going to spend $130. And of course, over time, that's going to mean you're going to be massively in debt because it's a huge amount of money. Because it doesn't much when you say, $30 on 100, okay. But now put that as 10,000 or 100,000, that's massive. And certainly then compound that over time and interest rates, etc. So I feel like people, by this social pressure, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be accountable and responsible, of course they should, but over that social pressure of the American dream stuff, end up making themselves incredibly vulnerable to these situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think a lot of these situations create a petri dish, if you will, of this kind of challenge where people, they're growing this culturally, and it's a really sad thing. So this is, when I'm looking at this from your point of view, I think, well, how do you predict that? Because I think there's places you could go there. Tell us about how you think you could help somebody like me in my company, or John in his company, or whoever it is. How can we be on top of that? Because you mentioned something I think is really useful.
Well, there's two ways. One is if I'm looking at this from a managerial standpoint, and certainly when I'm talking to C-suite executives, where you're in a position to actually make some mandates, so to speak. One of the things you want to look for, let's say that you've got a company of 500 people, but you've got a layoff coming of 50 to 75 of those folks. All right, of the 50 to 75, some questions you need to be asking: who recently has made major purchases? Who recently has bought a new home? Who's recently bought $80,000+ luxury car? Who's recently enrolled their kids in private school? Who's recently even gotten married? Why? Now, it's not to say that any of those people are going to do anything wrong, but when we're profiling, when we're looking at behaviors, not appearances, but behaviors, we now know here's someone who, once we let them go, is going to be in a position of having to fill that financial void. So, would they potentially be open to someone from that outside whispering into their ear, offering either, hey, come over to our company, but as you do, take these files with you?
Right. Before
you leave the company, do this little bit of sabotage. Before you leave the company, give us these particular files. Whether you come or not, we'll pay you for it. We don't have to hire you. We'll pay you for it. Is that a person who feels that they would be justified when the company has treated them wrong by letting them go and taking some of those actions? Those are the questions that C-level execs have to be asking and passing on to HR and risk management. Who has access to what files, what resources, what incomes, what status, what access, if we're about to let them go? And what is going to be their response, especially if they've made major purchases or major lifestyle changes where there's going to be a financial void once we do let them go?
You know, you and I, in our previous conversation when we were not on air, we talked about profiling and that I do that with finding companies' ideal clients and even ideal employees to make them loyal. But one of the things that we sort of touched on there was triggers. Like what are the triggers? What is the pressure point that creates that thing? And that's exactly what you're sharing here. Yeah. And I think it's important for people to recognize, because Susie might be a lovely person and been wonderful for years. Mm-hmm. But you add enough pressure to a human being. If you understand the psychology of people, you add enough pressure to a human being, they shift to another part of their brain. They go from the frontal cortex, which is reasonable and rational, to the amygdala, which is all about survival. And once you're in that place in your brain, 27% of the blood flow to your frontal lobe, which allows you to cognitively think, is gone. You are not only 27% dumber, but you are in survival mode. And when that is a threat to your clan, your family, your group, as you said, I just bought the big house and I've got the car, and now my ego's involved because I'm going to look bad to the neighbors and my friends, and my family could be out on the street. That's a lot of pressure for people. So I think, what you just said I think it's profound, and I think it's, in all likelihood, that must be like one of those aha moments for the executives you're speaking to go, oh, yeah, I would never have thought of that. I do a background check, see if they're a criminal, but the person who's been a wonderful person who just bought another house, never would have thought of that.
I love a quote from Carl Menninger, founder of the Menninger Clinic, who once said, I don't believe in such a thing as the criminal mind, because everyone's mind is criminal. We are all capable of criminal fantasies and thoughts. Now, you take a person who's already predisposed to potential criminal thoughts, let alone behavior. You add the stress factors, and here's another factor. Add the human ego.
Absolutely.
Where someone has done me wrong.
Yeah.
When Gavin DeBecker wrote the book, The Gift of Fear, he's probably the world's most prolific person on criminal profiling, the Mosaic profiling system for Interpol, CIA, FBI, Secret Service. He refers to a system when you're assessing threat called JACA, J-A-C-A, Justification, Alternatives, Consequences, and Ability. But the very first foundation of all of that is J, justification. You take a person who feels that they have been wronged, and that is the beginning of all things bad. Whether it's legal retaliation or physical retaliation, espionage, sabotage, whatever. You take that person that looks at that HR director and says, you knew 3 months ago, when I was going to buy this house, when I was going to buy this car, when I was going to enroll my kids in this private school, you knew this layoff was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And you still let me make that purchase. They won't say it out loud, but they're going to be thinking.
Oh, yeah.
So does that person now feel justified in having that little tightening of the thumb screw on their way out? That little, I'm not going to use the sign language, but
you can, it's okay.
On their way out.
Sure.
Say, okay, you think you did me in? Yeah, screw you.
Yeah. It's a very interesting piece, again, in assessing these threats. That, again, I think that it's great that you're sharing this because, again, I think that people so often miss that. Very often, I've said, because of my background in psychology, one of the greatest skills that all human beings contain is the ability to justify. We can justify anything at all. Anything, particularly if the ego is involved, meaning I feel like I've lost face, in some way got shamed. I can justify just about anything at all. And if you don't have, particularly if you don't have a solid personal moral code, and by that, let me be clear as you watch this, I'm not talking about your religion.
Right.
Because that's something you learned. But actually an internal fortitude to say, no, this is not right. And I think what you just said is really important. When you're talking about manipulating people, because you said that that third party can manipulate this person and say, hey, listen, they screwed you over. But, and again, a little off subject, but it really hits the point here. That's what I'm seeing politically in the U.S. right now, is let's point at all the fingers and saying, here's why these people did us wrong. Here's who we can blame. We can blame them. Now we're justified in doing crazy shit. We're justified in punching people at a political rally. We're justified in using racism and using sexism. We're justified in anything. And what's more is once you tap into that, it's so basic in people that it brings it up in them. And then they start doing that stuff.
You can apply this to road rage.
Absolutely.
Somebody cuts you off in traffic, and then you go alongside and you're staring at them in your window and giving that grimace, and all of a sudden they give you the sign language. Boom! Now you got an explosion of two egos. All because someone didn't know how to control it and didn't know how to keep their ego in check. They let their ego speak louder than their instinct and common sense.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Even when companies are letting people go, there have been studies and research shown there's better times of the day to do so, there's better times of the week to do so. And also, does everyone need a security escort when they're leaving the building? Now, if you're dealing with a company that has proprietary information, intellectual properties, government secrets, obviously, yes. But if they're just not making their sales quota, do you make them do the walk of shame through the offices and their coworkers and their friends on their way out just because they didn't hit their sales quota, but they're being treated like a criminal? There's all kinds of things that we typically refer to as standard operating procedures that we really looked at from a psychological standpoint, and we realized we are challenging the egos. It's almost like when a woman gets a divorce, she's having a problem with the husband, the immediate knee-jerk reaction by many women and even many family law attorneys is get a restraining order.
Right.
Well, that may exacerbate the situation because now you're challenging the ego of this person's in, oh, you think a piece of paper is going to keep me away?
Right.
And feel challenged and feel they have to step up to somehow justify and validate their manhood. So you have, to me, understanding and learning how to deal with people's egos, as well as their just general human psyche, is so key to potentially de-escalating situations, reverse engineering these threats, but it has to start somewhere. And unfortunately, you and I talked about this on camera before, we live in a society where we stopped teaching safety after 6th grade.
Yeah.
If you served in military, law enforcement, or security, the only time anyone talked to you about any of these issues was K through 12, and we did it through talking dogs, jingles, coloring books, and sing-song type things. It was all fantasy.
Yeah.
And no one has really had any ongoing continuing education, let alone an upgraded seminar since. So you've got this mass of people walking around the planet who have not had anyone really talking about their safety, their security, critical thinking skills, or any of this since they were in 6th grade. And you wonder why you're seeing what you are on the evening news.
We speak a lot in our work and with companies and organizations, we speak a lot about emotional intelligence. But where the differentiation point is for us is we say, you can pick up Daniel Goleman's book, fantastic book, Emotional Intelligence at Work, etc. You can read the books on emotional intelligence. You can maybe even develop some emotional intelligence, take the seminars, do what it is. But there's a great deal of difference between emotional intelligence applied to others and versus emotional intelligence applied to yourself, because emotional intelligence applied to yourself is called emotional maturity. And that's a different gig altogether. Because I know some very highly emotionally intelligent people who have very little emotional maturity when applied to themselves. And the thing about it, again, back to catalysts, is understanding that certain situations will make you immature emotionally, right? So, I've always said, I'm one of the more enlightened people I know, given the situation. If I got cut off 4 times in the next 5 minutes, I'm kind of regressing. I can feel the blood boil like anybody else. There are situations that will do that, and I think that this is one of the great pieces of missing, because again, we see the person who's very quiet and very calm, and I talk a lot about this one too. Very quiet, very calm, easygoing, quote unquote, water off a duck's back. And I go, me, because of my understanding of psychology, go, this is somebody you're going to have to watch. And they go, why? I go, this is a time bomb. And they go, why? Why would you say that? Bob's such a nice man, easy going, blah, blah, blah. I say, let's do the research. Just go online and do the research on somebody who went, quote unquote, postal. And they interviewed the neighbor, and the neighbor said, oh, he was such a nice man. He used to mow my lawn and pick up the dog shit for me and never was a bother. I can't understand why, when you go into his house, it was full of explosives and he shot everybody in the schoolyard. Yeah, because that's called repressed rage. Mm-hmm. and understanding that everybody has a boiling point. I don't care if you're the Dalai Lama. There's a great interview with the Dalai Lama where somebody said to him, do you ever get upset? And he's like, oh, yeah, I've got a bad temper. And it was like, thank you. So wonderful to have people realize that it's a fool's errand to think that some people don't have that. And I think, is that part of the threat assessment work? Is that how you understand that?
I had a city manager from one of our municipalities here in the Dallas area give me a wonderful story that really, it's like a step-by-step of the justification, alternatives, consequences, and ability scenario played out. He said, Jeff, one day, and this was the city manager over all the city service, he said, I was walking down the hallway at City Hall one day, and I see this elderly gentleman. He's sitting on one of the benches in the hallway. He's got a cane, and he's just white-knuckling the cane. And he has a vest on that had emblems that obviously showed he was a veteran. So as I come upon him, I'm saying, having a good day? And he didn't even look at me. He just kept looking at this cane that he was just white-knuckling and saying, nope, but I'm about to go home. I'm going to get one of my guns. I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to get some satisfaction. The city manager said, when he got done with those words, I called my secretary, I cleared my morning, and that man had me as his personal attaché all morning. And he said, as we went around, this is a beautiful story. He said, as we went around and went department by department to get his situation resolved, his story came forward, because everybody's got a story.
Absolutely.
His story came forward. What happened? Here was a man who had been given 6 months to live with cancer. He was up there at City Hall to take care of all the final arrangements because his wife wasn't in great health. And he knew that she was going to be burdened with all this paperwork and all these different things. So he was up there to clear the way so that when he passed, she would not have to deal with any of this. But every department he went to, he was hitting the brick wall. You need this form. You need to have this authorized. You need to have this certified. You need this form to do so-and-so.
Yeah.
And he had just reached wit's end.
Sure.
And the manager said by the time he left, we had everything done so he could part in peace. Now, when you look at him from a threat assessment situation, here was an older gentleman that probably if you and I passed him on the street on any given day, we would give him a salute ourselves saying, what a wonderful guy. But when you look at his situation,
right,
you had someone who was absolutely justified in his anger over what he was facing. When you look at alternatives, everywhere you turn, no one was giving him the time of day. Everybody was pushing the buck. Everybody was pushing blame somewhere else. And then he wasn't getting any alternative to really focus his way. You look at consequences, he couldn't care less. In 6 months, he was out of here. Send him to jail. So he didn't care about consequences. And you look at ability, here was a man trained by our country to kill people who had guns at home. So the profiling of justification, alternatives, consequences, and abilities, he was a ticking time bomb. Fortunately, you had a city manager that simply exhibited basic human empathy and got involved with that story. And who knows how many lives he potentially saved.
That's immediately what I thought when you said it. Like, how many lives did that city manager, how many lives did he save?
Yeah.
Wow. You know.
By the way, I told that story in Austin a few weeks ago, and I had a lady came up that represented a network of about 150 hospitals. She said, Jeff, I'm glad you told that story because I have the other one where that same kind of veteran showed up at the hospital for his chemo treatment, and he was told, you don't even exist in our files. You don't exist at all. And the nurse got really trite with him, somebody in her early 20s, and she said, as far as I know, you don't even exist on the planet. So what did he do? He went outside, got a rifle out of his truck, came back in, and shot her behind the nurse station, killed her dead. He went to prison, and he got his chemo when he was in prison, so he's still alive in his 70s. He didn't care. But there was someone did intervene on his part, and look what happened on the other side of that coin.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? So, can you give us a couple of, because we've gone into some great depth here, and this is a great conversation, and it's certainly not a usual conversation for most people. Can you give us a couple of sort of hard-nosed, nailed-down tips in how to assess a potential threat and potentially prevent it? Because a lot of the things that we're talking about are kind of not really nebulous if you know what you're doing, but for the average person in the street, it's like, it's a vet, and he's a bit pissed off, or, this person is quiet, and yeah, I know they get a lot of stuff dumped on them, but they're okay. How can you give us a couple of nailed down hard truths so people can get this?
Well, first of all, anytime, I don't care if it's road rage or an encounter on the street or encounter in the pub or the bar or wherever, whenever you're faced with an unknown person, understand any and all actions are also going to be unknown as far as what their response will be to your action. So before you engage and enrage someone that you have no history whatsoever to, ask yourself one golden rule question. Is it worth it?
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple. Is it worth it to engage and enrage this person? Now that's just Joe and Jane average on the street, on the road, in the mall, fighting over a parking space during the holidays, at the shopping, whatever. Don't engage and enrage someone that you have no history to whatsoever because you don't know.
But at an egoic level, the answer is yes. It's worth it.
Yeah.
At an egoic level, it's like, that's my parking spot. I got here first and I've been waiting.
Yeah, and let's consider where that would get you. But when they look at those kind of situations, most of the time, this is the classic turn the other cheek example, an application where is it worth it? No, it's really not. No point either one of us going to the jail, let alone the hospital or the morgue. We had two idiots got into a fight after a Dallas Cowboy game here last season, and they got into a fight, escalated in the parking lot, and one pulled out a gun, and the crowd around him started yelling, "Kill him, kill him!" He shot the man in the head. Fortunately, the guy survived, and obviously the other guy went to jail. But the very crowd that you would think, "Oh, don't do it," with one son, kill him. So, we're living in a society nowadays where the mob mentality, and I'm sure there are probably people there sitting there with their camera phones trying to record it as well. So anytime you're in a situation where you have an unknown person, anything and everything that's going to follow is also unknown.
Yeah.
So you don't know where this is going to take you or put you. Jail, hospital, or morgue. Is it worth it? Now, if we're dealing with a person we do know, we do have history to, that's where we have the advantage of really looking at that profile of the person.
Mm-hmm.
Does this person feel any sense of justification? Why? Why would they feel justified in stealing on their way out? Why would they feel justified in embezzling funds? Why would they feel justified in retaliating by getting an attorney for wrongful dismissal or retaliating physically? And this is where egos and even corporate egos come into play. What did we do in their mind, that would justify them taking this action? And if there's something that we did, is there something we can undo? I had a company a while back that reached out, their HR director and their CEO, hey, we've got to let this guy go. He's bipolar. We have actually paid for his therapy, but now he's using an excuse, and he hadn't just shown up for work for the last 3 months. And that was okay. We were getting ready to go through the termination process. Then one of our coworkers said, oh, by the way, last week so-and-so just bought a gun. So now our entire thinking has changed. And when I sat down with them, I said, and I asked the CEO, I said, let me ask, I know it's kind of like the old thing about we don't bargain with terrorists, but is it worth it to really push this guy's potential buttons? Not knowing if he's on his meds or not. You already know he's bipolar. You now know he's armed. Is there a way you can let him go, give him a letter recommendation where you can feel honest about it? Is there even some kind of severance that you could offer that would cushion the blow for him to simply cut the ties and move on without coming back in any form of retaliation? And the CEO said, you know what? In this particular case, because there is such a thing as situational ethics, in this particular case, I am fine with giving him a little bit more on the way out if it keeps him from coming back. Now, is that something you want everybody to be known in the company? No. But even some of his coworkers were antsy about what was going to happen once they fired Joe.
Yeah, you see, again, for me, a lot of the time around emotional intelligence is this distinction between content and context. So the content is a guy is leaving the company, he's being let go, he didn't show up for work. Why the hell should he get any severance? Mm-hmm. That's the content. But the context is what creates the justification, and the context of the person who potentially is violent, but also the context of the person preventing that violence. You know, you were saying something earlier I think is profoundly important. I was trained originally my first sport was boxing, and then I went on to do martial arts. And it was fascinating to me to discover that very rarely were any of the guys who trained with me, who alongside me, who trained alongside me, whether it was in boxing or martial arts, very few of those guys ever had a fight.
Yeah.
Never have a fight. But one of the things that one of the guys once said, which I thought was profoundly important, is he said, now this is, we're talking 30 years ago when people didn't carry guns like they do now, or even knives. Yeah. And he said, you don't want to get into a fight, because, and these are his words, because you don't know what kind of nutter you're dealing with. Those are his terms, right? Meaning there are people who look like, that you could take them, but you have no idea what's going on underneath the skin. You have no idea what's going on inside that person's head, let alone weapons. Yeah. But context, again, you don't have context. So maybe that guy's wife just screwed his best friend, or maybe something, they lost their child, or some, whatever it is.
He just got fired.
Yeah, exactly. And you have no idea what it is. And getting into that potential state is so, but again, it demands, and this is the point I think that I really want people to get from you. It demands that you consider this piece that I think is missed. Did I, meaning personally, did we, meaning the organization, damage this person's ego? And I think that that's a piece that people miss. Did we damage their ego? Because I tell you, you can punch them in the nose privately and you might get away with it. But punch them in the nose even verbally, in front of another person, in front of other people, dead in the water. That ego stuff is dangerous stuff to play with.
Oh, anytime you're challenging the human ego, what you said a while ago, great little fun story. The guy that I met several years ago, he trained Christian Bale for the Batman films, Liam Neeson, Daniel Craig for the Bond films, Tom Cruise, Jack Reacher, Mission Impossible. Anyway, I was visiting with him several years ago in the UK, and Justo Dieguez, this guy grew up on the streets of Spain with the gypsies, very interesting guy, broken English kind of accent. He was asking me, he says, so in America, are you familiar with many of the martial arts they teach in America? I said, well, I know quite a few of them. Why? He said, so did you ever hear of the Spanish judo? And I said, Spanish judo? Well, I've heard of judo, and like jiu-jitsu has Brazilian jiu-jitsu, is it like that? He said, no, my friend. The Spanish judo, it means you don't know if you have a knife, you don't know if you have a gun, you don't know if you have friends, you don't know. And what you don't know can get you killed. And that factor, when you're dealing with an unknown person, I don't care their gender, I don't care their size, I don't care their age, none of that matters. All that matters is you don't know.
Right. So what is the number one protective advice you would give somebody?
Well, just as a general rule for anybody across all bounds and genders and boundaries and professions and everything else, Trust your instincts, not your ego. Big difference. Trust your instincts. Your instincts, just like that city manager that was walking down the hall and picked up. Was it empathy? Was it instincts that picked up on here was someone who was not having a good day? Now, he followed up on his instincts and actually intervened and interacted with him to find out there was something he could do. But our instincts rarely, if ever, send us on the wrong path. Right. They have been genetically encoded after eons for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to keep us vertical on the planet. If we don't listen to them, we end up in a different position on the planet. But the reason they're there is to keep us in a vertical position. And so when I hear and see people often going wrong is when they put the instincts aside and they let their ego, standard operating procedure, all these things factor into play instead of looking at another human being with the golden rule applied. How would I wish to be treated if this were me?
Right. Yeah, I think that I agree with you. I think instinct is incredibly important, and understanding. I mean, you don't have to get it at the level that you and I might get it, but understanding that everybody's ego is fragile, and everybody. I mean, don't care who you are. Everybody's ego is fragile, and that if you can operate, and I get. Please understand, I'm not judging anybody. I get that it's difficult, but if you can approach a situation from a little more empathy and a little more compassion, the chance of that blowing up on you is probably a lot less. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah. And so often, we look at cameras and card access systems and alarms and security and all these things as things that are going to make a place safer. And I've said for over 20 years, there are no such thing as safe or unsafe places. There's only safe or unsafe people.
Yeah.
You don't make a company or organization safe by technology. You make it safe by educating your people, where human intelligence overrides technological expertise, because the human mind and the human instincts absolutely, hands down, can demolish any form of technological security system that you can imagine. I have seen it time and time again through social engineering and others, where people spent tens of thousands of dollars on firewall protection, on cameras, on card access, and one clever human being circumvented the entire process. So the key really is educating people. And even OSHA, when you look at what they have to say about workplace violence, very little is said about technology. What comes back is training and education, training and education, training and education. Because you are only as safe as your weakest link.
Very cool, my friend. It's been a great show. Wonderful having you here. Tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you, about your organization, potentially bringing you in to speak for their organization, and any other resources that they might be able to tap into.
Sure. Simply Jeff at Defense by Design, but the website is defensebydesign.com. And for any of our UK friends, we had this joke the other day, defense is still the US spelling of the word DEFENSE by design. I say that because I've had some friends who grew up in the UK. I couldn't ever find it because they were spelling it the other way, DEFENCE. So it's DEFENSE by design.com. Facebook, I love Facebook, putting things on there. You should do a little 1-minute PSA and just try to push educational things out there. It's not really sales so much. You know what I do. You'll know how to hire me. But can I do things that can actually empower you and your organization to live a safer life and navigate the world that's out there?
Yeah, that's great. Actually, I'll tell you, this morning before our interview, I went to look for your site, and guess how I spelled it? I spelled it wrong, so thank you for reminding everybody. It is defense.
For all the mates and blokes out there.
Exactly. For all fellow Pommies and Aussies, and even maybe even Canadians, it is defense with an S by design.com. Jeff McKissack, great show. Great having you on, man. It was I think this is a very important subject, and I know that in many ways we've kind of scraped the surface of this, and I know that in your trainings you let people really see how they can get underneath this and really grasp the gravity of this, not only at a personal level but definitely at a corporate level. And I want to thank you for being part of the show. Thank you so much.
Well, Doug, thank you for allowing me to share on the show as well.
Absolutely honor. So stay with us. I'm going to sign everybody off, and I'll come back to you at the end. I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us today. And again, as always, I say to you, please don't listen to this show. Watch it, listen to it, take notes on it, and apply it. If you just have it running in the background, it won't change anything. So apply what it is you learned. This is a great guest with some really great insights. Pay attention. Remember, everybody has an ego. Everybody has justification for everything. A little more compassion would be really great. And if you are truly serious about embracing the kind of positive disruption that builds a culture that develops the next generation of leaders, not only into who they want to be, but who they need to be, and have them become evangelical about your organization and have them 10 times more engaged, reach out to me through fullmontyleadership.com. fullmontyleadership.com. And remember, right now, we are developing the pro version. So right now, you have a version that's going to be available to you absolutely free for you to assess your 5 leadership strengths, where your real power is. Get yourself over to Matrix, like the movie, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. It's $197. You get it for free. Get over there and find out what your leadership strengths really are. Thank you for joining us here at Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. Again, I'm your host, Doug Barron. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please get over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And until next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can be a little more empathetic, a little more compassionate, a little more safe. Till next time, Doug Barron out.